you have to come back better individually in order to actually make the pottery better. The idea is when you break the vase, it comes back stronger and more beautiful.
The concept of Kintsugi is a Japanese concept that makes sure that in all the pieces coming back together of this pottery, it is done with either platinum, gold, or silver. So you picture a bowl that's been shattered to pieces and then comes back together and is put together. But in the in-between, there's gold. Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today, for episode 140, we have how to come back stronger after heartache. Before we jump into this episode, as always, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and so many others. Personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, mental health, all of the above being spread into the world. What I desperately needed in my childhood. All those things are being spread into the world of so many people. So thank you. As always, my love. What is your intention for today's episode?
My intention is for those of you who are clicking on this episode, if you're in a period, in a chapter, or reflecting on a moment of heartache, that you don't feel alone. And ultimately, so that we can have this episode be your bridge to more connection in your relationship, especially after or in the aftermath of a rupture in your relationship.
Okay, so you and I coached a couple way back. It's been 4 years of us coaching couples.
It's insane how time flies.
It's wild. We started
amazing work.
4 years ago. Emilia and I started.
So grateful.
This was back when we had any time at all. And you and I way back 4 years ago said, you know what? Let's dedicate an hour a day, an hour every Saturday. An hour every Saturday, not an hour a day. An hour every Saturday to coaching couples because we had such a magnificent relationship. We were so grateful and we wanted to give back.
We wanted to bring more love the world.
Into the world. And that was long before this podcast. And we just, every Saturday, we had a relationship talk. Service Saturday is what we used to call it. And that's where it started. So we've been coaching couples all over the world for 4 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, so speaking of which, one of the early couples that we coached, married couple, the man in the relationship was struggling with growth. The female was on a growth trajectory big time. They were diverging more than they were converging. And I'm going to keep this high level, obviously, for anonymity.
I love that word.
Is that the correct word? Anonymity.
Great word.
And really what it comes down to, in hindsight, I think this is pretty clear, is they were playing not to lose rather than playing to win. Fear and scarcity was causing fixed mindset. Fear, scarcity was causing the male to not really grow a ton. And the female was going through all this growth and all this growth and all this growth that it felt very overwhelming to the man. Ultimately, the female eventually in the relationship said, I can't do this anymore. This is not constructive anymore. This is destructive. I'm not doing it. We're done, essentially. I'm not doing this. I can't keep doing this. After that, the man ate the humble pie, started getting a therapist, started going to a man's group to work on himself. And really, at this point, there's nothing left to lose. You already, quote unquote, lost. So there's everything to gain again and nothing to lose. So he just started growing and growing and growing and working on it. And the intention, from my understanding, wasn't even necessarily growing just to get her back. But over time, they started to work really well. The reason they started to work, in hindsight, is the female actually had the courage to call him out and stop walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And really hold him accountable to what he said he would do and to growth in general. And the man started eating humble pie repeatedly and actually improving and getting help, the help that he really needed, facing his past, all this stuff. Eventually, and this is over a long period of time, at least 6 months, if not a year, he ended up reproposing.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are stronger than they've ever been before. And I can tell that that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so Emilia and I, in this episode, want to talk about a concept called Kintsugi. Kintsugi. I have my phone up. I Googled this.
Yeah. I was like, I think that this is a good idea. And Alan said wabi sabi. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Kintsugi.
So it turns out wabi sabi is a different concept in Japanese culture.
But very kind of
very
parallel. Yeah.
So you can look this up, Kintsugi. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. You have to go look it up yourself. I knew you'd think that was funny. The philosophy of Kintsugi emphasizes that resilience is not merely about bouncing back from adversity, but also about embracing the process of repair and renewal, aka evolution. My honey of all ventures. Okay. Just like the meticulous process of fixing broken pottery, relationships demand patience, effort, and care to mend snags in your relationship fabric, your relational fabric. Emilia calls this... One sec, let me turn... I want more than that. I had more than that before. Hold on. Emilia, in our relationship, says we don't want to cut strings. And if there are any strings that do snap, she thinks of our relationship like a rope, a series of strings wound together. She uses the metaphor, if you've ever seen Inside Out 2, when a core memory gets put into the pool and there's this sort of belief system string that gets created, and then you flick the string and it says, I'm a good person.
Right.
So
we have a good relationship.
Yes, we are good. Everything is great. Yeah. I kind of suck.
We love adventures.
Yeah.
We don't get stressed out ever.
Ever. No. Yes, you are fine.
She's totally fine.
She's totally fine. While I figure out why.
Yeah, so while Ellen does that, I talk about this a lot with one-on-one clients, but the reason why we want to bring it into this episode is because when you talk about the relationship fabric is what you mentioned in there, love. We come into relationships, and you've heard us talk about this in different fractures, if you will, in each podcast episode. We are all so fragile, deep down inside, just like a piece of very delicate, fragile pottery. And the truth is, life happens. We're imperfect. We have snags. We're not all made perfectly, right? So when we get into a conflict, or when we have a relationship where both partners aren't necessarily growing in parallel or at the same pace and rate, which is what we find often with our relationship talks coaching clients, there's always some degree of fracture, or, I dropped the ball on this. And what this concept is really, how do you come back after a conflict? How do you come back after a repair? And how do you come back to this concept of, it's not just like you glue it back together and try to just have it pretend like it didn't happen, but rather you embrace it. And the concept of Kintsugi is a Japanese concept that makes sure that in all the pieces coming back together of this pottery, it is done with either platinum, gold, or silver. So you picture a bowl that's been shattered to pieces and then comes back together and is put together. But in the in-between, there's gold. I actually have a card for my sister, literally, with that bowl on it over my whiteboard. It's so, so beautiful because, again, it's about embracing the heartache, not running away from it. It's about embracing where things went wrong and discovering why. And it's about really coming together as a couple to learn from mistakes, mishaps, insert whatever it was for you and your partner here, and be better. And it's a beautiful concept that I think so many relationships, can really identify with, if you will.
So whenever Emilia and I have had a challenging moment where she believes that strings may have been cut, I'm always asking, how do we sew them back together stronger? AKA, if we did break a bowl, how do we mend it with gold?
Yeah.
Or platinum or silver to make it even more beautiful and stronger?
You usually use the word, I want to learn from this. I want to grow from this. And that phrasing gives so much reassurance to someone like myself. And I know that this couple that we were talking about just a second ago, using as an example, the woman being the more growth oriented, she's facing a lot of her growth stuff, right? She's done a lot of the inner work. So of course she's going to be like, this is amazing, and want to bring her partner in it, right? Just like I had done with, babe, I think that you're leaving a lot on the table by not going and doing the inner work, right? Using therapy as a tool for that. When you do that and you don't have a partner that is really eager to learn those lessons or reflect inwardly and suspend self-judgment, that becomes really difficult. So that's something that, phrases, if you're listening to this episode and maybe you just underwent a breakup or what have you, Alan uses the phrase, I want to learn from this. So ultimately, in this, what it takes in you to be able to say that after a rupture so that we can repair, so that we actually are mended closer together. What do you think that is out of the triad of transformation?
Well, so the triad of transformation that she's referencing is humility, courage, and vulnerability. And I do believe that every transformation requires those three. And usually we have one good one decent one, and one terrible one. In every moment, I'm either not being humble enough, not being courageous enough, or not being vulnerable enough. And it takes humility to go get a therapist. It takes humility to join a group coaching program. It takes humility to say, I'm sucking. And I'm sorry. It also takes vulnerability to say, it takes courage to admit that as well. So I think it's all three, but I think, and I'll always come back to this, I'm sorry to be redundant, but everyone check in right now with which one is lagging. Because whichever one is lagging is the bottleneck to your relationship. It just is. Now, when you say, I want to learn from this, yes, I need to understand what happened and why it happened, because if I don't, I can't improve in the right direction. And so underneath it is belief in my own ability to transform, and more importantly, a desire to get better. I want to use this metaphor real quick. I've never used it before. And by the way, I did find the thing.
You did.
I'm so grateful I found it, because that took me forever. I'm sorry for what seemed like ignoring you, love. I went back into my history, because it's actually an AI generated response that's so good. So anyways, I'm going to read that in a second. Stay tuned. However, the thing that I wanted to say, what was I saying right before that? Self-belief, wanting to get better, wanting to improve. Oh, growth mindset. Underneath that, there was one more thing that I wanted to say.
You're talking about courage, vulnerability, humility.
No, after that.
You want a desire to get better.
After that, a desire to get better. Oh, I found it. My goodness, I found it. All right, awesome. Okay, so I love this analogy. I'm a computer engineer, and I'm really leaning into that, so please don't shut this off. So this is an iPhone 14 Pro Max. Yes. An iPhone Pro 14 Max shouldn't date an iPhone 2. I'm serious.
I know you are. Just the concept of that's funny.
It's so hilarious.
Dating an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's great, though. And
come on now. And or an iPhone Pro 14 Max shouldn't date the first Android ever created. Have you might not have had a phone back when the first Android, it was a piece of garbage. The first Android was hot garbage. And the first iPhone, if I had an iPhone from 2007 when I was a senior in high school, and you were 3, I'm kidding. we playfully joke with how much older I am than Emilia, 6 years. Who's counting?
Hi everybody, I'm Caleb and this is my beautiful wife, Angela. We're pretty new clients to Al and Emilia and their conscious couples coaching.
Yeah, I think we started back in early 2022, around February, and our relationship has completely shifted in a few short months.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from working with them was our communication, which I believe is an obstacle for most couples. I was talking to Ange in a way that I would understand, but it wouldn't connect to her, which caused some arguments, but Al and Emilia were able to point that out, and now I can talk to her how she's going to understand. She can do the same for me.
Yes, our communication is way better than it's ever been. We've been together for about 6 years now, and as well as just really figuring out what our core values personally are, but as well as what they are in our relationship. So being able to communicate from that space is really valuable. So thank you, Alan and Emilia, for everything you've done and for leading the way.
All right, so here's the deal. I often say this, and I need to continue saying this. In this relationship with this man and this woman, she was becoming an iPhone 12 and then an iPhone 13 and then an iPhone 14. She was improving. Her camera was getting better. Her software was getting better. Her UI was getting better. She was surfing the internet better. She had better capabilities. It's a metaphor. Everyone, please understand it's a metaphor. If back in 2007, the very first iPhone came out, if I could show you how bad that phone is compared to this one, it would blow your mind. As a matter of fact, I almost want to buy one, although at this point it's probably way overpriced because it's an antique now.
No, literally.
But an iPhone, the very first iPhone that came out that was a revolutionary breakthrough back in 2007 is now hot garbage in comparison to this phone. I really need this to land. That's how relationships work too. The 3.6 version of Alan can be a peer and in a relationship with the 3.0 version of Emilia. Okay. This female in the relationship was growing and updating and improving and growing and updating and improving, but the male in the relationship wasn't. That's never going to work. And so when you and I break strings, when you and I have conflict, when you and I come back from heartbreak, come back stronger, it's because I know that I have to update my iPhone myself to become more capable. I think that people misunderstand that all of the success that you have in life, your home, your intimate relationship, the car you drive, the career you have, the business you have, the success, whatever title, for the most part, is a byproduct of your own personal capabilities. So just like this iPhone 14 is way more capable than the iPhone, the very first one, Alan 3.6 is way more capable than Alan 2.6. Alan 2.6 would have held you back unintentionally just because he's too young, he's too naive, he's good looking, but what are you going to do with that? No, but that's my point, and I really wanted to make that land. So this concept of coming back stronger, you have to come back better individually in order to actually make the pottery better. The idea is when you break the vase, it comes back stronger and more beautiful. But the only way that can happen is if you two work together to actually make it stronger and better. And by the way, gold isn't cheap. Silver isn't cheap. Platinum isn't cheap. So it costs time and effort in this metaphor to actually build back stronger.
Absolutely. When you said inside out too, what came to mind was something that we often see, and this was very prevalent in this couple as well, and we've seen this with multiple couples. There are very fearful and like more sad, riddled parts of one partner. And then if you kind of draw parallels to Insight 2 characters, you have one partner that's way more joy filled, right? The character Joy, who's just always excited and everything's great and very optimistic and we can get better, right? And then there's other characters like Sadness, who's just so sad all the time. And then Fear, who's, oh my God, we can't do anything, freaking out all the time. And the male in the relationship was more driven by his fearful and sad parts than he could even allow joy to come in. Whereas the growth-oriented woman in the relationship, she had joy driving far more than her fearful and sad parts. And so I think ultimately for those listening to this podcast episode, the one minor shift that is really critical to have to this whole conversation, honor this whole conversation, is what is that belief? What part, what emotion is usually driving the bus, for lack of better words? And you and I actually started this morning with a great speech that you and I were like, yeah, heck yeah. Things don't get easier, right? Relationships do not get easier. You just have to get better at handling hard better. What's the saying?
Yeah, that's
you brought
exactly.
it into my life.
So there's a 3-minute speech on YouTube. We'll actually put it in the show notes. It's very,
Amazing.
very powerful. And it's this idea that life is never going to get easier. You hear people all the time, well, next chapter will be easier. Next the next job will be easier. My next relationship will be easier. Retirement will be easier. They say in the speech, it's very, very true. Life never gets easier. You handle hard better.
Oof.
You handle hard better. My relationship with Emilia, it might look easy, and it is in terms of how well we get along and how much we love each other and how much we miss each other. I mean, it's cute. It would have made me sick in the past how cute we are. Oh my God. I'm being playful with that. It's the most ever. This is what I've always wanted. However, the truth of the matter is I have to keep getting better in order for our relationship to keep getting better. And I always use the home. You can't you can't not renovate your home. It's going to get worse over time if you don't put energy into it, if you don't put time into it, if you don't put money into it. And so in the case of this relationship, the man wasn't putting as much time, effort, and money into their own personal growth and updating their iPhone or renovating their home in this metaphor. And so you're going to have to do that. All right. So I want to share this because I think this is super important. The Japanese art of Kintsugi, which means golden repair, can be applied to relationships to promote healing, acceptance, and forgiveness. Kintsugi can be a metaphor for healthy relationships and can help couples in crisis. Number 1, embrace imperfection. Number 2, practice patience and effort. Number 3, let go of perfection. We already said that. Number 4, find the good in each other. Number 5, create a safer relationship. Number 6, revere conflict. That's interesting.
Ooh, the forgiveness one and revere conflict just jumped off the page for me.
Yes.
Because forgiveness is such an element of heartache, because people, and we talk about this at Evolve all the time, actually. Forgiveness, if you do not forgive those who you feel have wronged you or hurt you, you carry that with you.
Yeah.
But if you have the courage to let that go, especially in a relationship, you're no longer a prisoner.
Which by the way, doesn't happen usually unless you see the other person actually take ownership. Because when other people don't take ownership, I find it harder to forgive because it'll keep happening. They're not going to break the cycle.
Yeah.
But when you see someone else take ownership and say, yeah, that was a past version of me, that was not my best self, and I'm going to do better. That gives you the certainty you need to actually give that forgiveness, knowing that you're not going to beat your head against the wall repeatedly and keep getting hurt over and over and over again. Because I actually think there is some truth to don't forgive everyone for everything. There are some things that you're going to have to sail away from.
Definitely.
You're going to have to. Some people, someone asked me on a podcast yesterday, and by the way, I'm glad that you brought Evolve into this. I would really love it if we could bring more of Evolve's work into the Conscious Couples podcast. I think it's really important. And I feel like you separate them often.
I do.
Yeah, and I don't want you to do that anymore.
Evolve Ventures.
Yeah. Go see it.
Go check us out.
So we have a couple that we're coaching who also is actually several, believe it or not, which is awesome at this point.
Yeah.
So there's another man that you're coaching, hybrid model.
Yep.
And he is embracing ownership for all of his poor choices and all this stuff. What do you think is causing that? And last thing real quick is read the signs. Kintsugi can help people read the signs and take effective action instead of arguing or ignoring things.
Nice.
So, and revering conflict, I'll be very brief about this, but
so good.
To revere conflict means exactly what we said. It's not wanting it to be easier. It's handling hard better. Conflict is inevitable. Yeah. Anyone who doesn't know that is obviously delusional. Life is conflict. But if you can get better and learn through every conflict, you will update your iPhone every single year and your relationship will get better and better and better instead of worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. So to answer that very shortly and in closing for this podcast episode, the male in the relationship never actually faced some of the traumas that he had experienced growing up and how those carried with him, never faced his quote unquote shit, for lack of better words. And that's honestly very common with the men that I coach and that you've interacted with too. Like, men aren't necessarily socially taught to do that and encouraged, right? And if
the
you
self-reflection
do,
is lower,
right?
I think, for sure, statistically.
Yeah, absolutely. And the compound effect of that really has people growing apart. That's why often the maturation of women, right? Like they will try to find someone that's actually older because it condenses the 6 years of compound effect of self-reflection and self-awareness. There's actually studies that show that. So ultimately a core belief that it's defectiveness. I am defective. I am unworthy. And fearful parts drive this person or has since then. And so
they were playing not to lose as well.
Yep.
Instead of playing to win. Playing to win means I'll be seen as a failure as long as I'm getting better. Playing not to lose is I don't want to ever be seen as incompetent.
Yeah. So as this person has started to build belief with your help as well, within themselves, it's kind of given them that lifeline to be able to reflect, and there was some help from the external in that this person had gotten, and now he's so much more open to receiving help. And I got some beautiful words of affirmation of like, oh my God, I've seen a therapist for years and years and years and years and years, and no one has held a safer space than you. It was like even better than that. One of the best compliments I've ever received. So it was so beautiful. And it's like it's our honor to do this work. So if you're someone that has been struggling in this arena, like, please reach out to us. You're never alone. There is always heartache that's happening around the world, and there are people like Alan and I who are so eager to help you overcome these fearful parts, overcome the deep core wounds and the core sadness that is here, and ultimately the limiting beliefs that are holding you and maybe your relationship back from, whether it be revering conflict or really forgiving your partner, right? The concept of Kintsugi can most certainly make your relationship so much better, because it's kind of like that breath of fresh air.
And by the way, all of this can be applied to your relationship with yourself
1000%
as well in terms of Kintsugi. So when your plumbing goes out, you call a plumber. When your car doesn't work, you call a mechanic. You're calling experts for things. You call a lawyer for law things. Emilia and I, for 4 years, we have studied this. And long before that, I've been coaching now. I've been mentoring for 10 years. The first 3 was mentoring. And then the last 7, I've been coaching. Thousands and thousands and thousands of hours literally tracked, studying human beings and what helps them flourish and succeed. Emilia, same deal. This is what we do. This is kind of all we do.
It's everything we do.
When your plumbing breaks, you call a plumber. What I'm saying is, call us. We are there for you, and we will help you, and we will find patterns. You're not alone in this. The patterns are very common. It always comes down to some sort of courage, humility, vulnerability. There are certain patterns we will recognize, and we will help you rebuild your relationship stronger. Okay. Also, we have a Relationship Talks event coming up next Tuesday.
We do. Not Thursday, but Tuesday. So make sure that you get in registration ASAP. The link will be in the show notes.
So this is dropping Monday. And
so it's literally the tomorrow.
Yep,
the tomorrow. So it's going to be October 15th. Join us at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How to be your true self in your relationship. We lose ourselves far more often than we actually give ourselves credit, and then we wake up 5 years later, 10 years later saying, what the heck have we done? So distant from ourselves, and we grow apart as a result of that, because your partner doesn't actually love the true you.
Well, the female in the relationship that we opened with felt like she wasn't being her true self, and now that the male has faced his past and done this work, now she feels like she can actually be her full self. And so that's exactly what this event is going to be. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you. Definitely check out the 3-minute speech in the show notes. And as always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is alazarus88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.